Like just having Slim Jim associate no longer with WCW or with WWE, but now with WCW, that's a big deal because you're always trying to get some of these major brands that you're pulling out your pitch book for to try wrestling that's quote unquote not WWE. So as if advertising in wrestling wasn't bad enough, now it's the off-brand wrestling. It's the not WWE wrestling. That's the way it was perceived back then. I mean, they were the Kleenex or the Coca-Cola. They were the brand. And I think Savage coming over not only gave more credibility and star power, but it also gave that Slim Jim sponsorship. And that was a vote of confidence in the advertising community as well, because the same agency, it's not like Slim Jim's just doing their own marketing. They're using agencies who are seeing what everybody else is doing. That was a big deal for WCW that doesn't get enough discussion.
Man, Connie, I love the history lesson because the whole timing of it. So Hogan signed what month of 93? Because he did
it was 94 when he came over, and his first match was against Ric Flair in July of 94. So the parade was in that spring.
Yeah, so it's huge. But no, the Savage part of the story gets completely forgotten. But in this era, it's gigantic. It is gigantic.
Wow. And of course, we know that you're going to wind up, you spend a little bit of time with him, a cup of coffee with him in the WWF, but you're going to follow suit. You're going to wind up in WCW come 1996, and Randy Savage is there, and he's a big part of this NWO storyline. There's been lots of rumor and innuendo, about him being paranoid and boy, he'd lock Liz in a broom closet and all these stories about how high strung and tightly wound he was. Was that your experience in working with him, whether it was in Memphis and seeing how he operated as a young man in the WWF when he visited Memphis for those cups of coffee in the early 90s, or here in WCW? How much of that is just hyperbole and boy, guys just like to talk, and how much was, oh no, Randy was pretty high strung and pretty paranoid?
Here's a little story behind the story that one of those tidbits of a memory came back, Conrad, last night. So how I've talked on here that, and I've done different interviews, but certainly on the podcast. Oh, what's the difference and all this? Randy's, I mean, I don't want to say it was the first Nitro I did, but it was early. And we called up and, hey man, how is everybody? And, and he would tell me how much, when we would reconnect, how much he respected. And he would tell some different stories and he would ask, whatever happened to this guy or that guy. Anyway, we would just kind of catch up. But Randy, if he wasn't the first, he was certainly the most direct in that this place, as in WCW, it's not like any place you've ever worked before. You better watch out. You better look over your shoulder. There's not one boss. It's a corporate environment. It's a different set of rules, a different set of circumstances. Anything you learned about the territories, kiss it goodbye. This ain't working for Vince McMahon. It is a dog eat dog world. And it came with an extra dose of, on the one hand, you could say paranoia, but on the other hand, it's the extra heaping and dose of compassion and desire and competitiveness. He absolutely read the room right. Now, two sides of that. Yes, I think Randy at times may have been paranoia, but he also, as I've learned through life, how you going to argue with success? Randy was successful at both places, made a lot of money. But as time went on, I think the marriage took its toll in so many different ways, and that's not what this podcast is about at all. But that, I felt for sure, weighed on Randy's heart. I think this is the beginning of all those kind of life events. Life hits hard, life hits fast. And life hits unapologetic. And I think as we have the luxury to look, hindsight's 2020, these are the early days. But Randy, again, was really good to me, but he's the one who really spelled it out for me on my first run in WCW. you're working into a corporate environment and there's snakes everywhere.
You don't share a ring with him very often in WCW. We mentioned, that match at Uncensored, Team NWO and Team Piper and blah blah blah. We also mentioned the whole Thunder Battle Royal. That was really crazy because that actually happens on May 2nd, 2000. So just a few weeks ago was 24 years ago.
Crazy.
And it was pretty crazy because there's 41 guys here, including Bret Hart, but more importantly, Randy Savage, who at this point wasn't even under contract to WCW, but we're bringing him in. And the idea that, I don't know, it always just sort of stuck out like a sore thumb that.
All right. Dave, pull that picture up. Folks, we're on YouTube right now. Check it out. Look across the ring at 41 people.
Let me tell you all the people who were in this.
I was going to say,
Ric Flair, Asia, Bam Bam Bigelow, Big Ron Reese, Big T, Big Vito, Billy Kidman, Brian Adams, Brian Clark, Buff Bagwell, Cassius, Chavo Guerrero Jr., Chris Candido, Chris Kanyon, Kurt Hennig, Diamond Dallas Page, Disco Inferno, Heavy D, Horace Hogan, Hugh Morris, Hulk Hogan, Jeff Jarrett, Jim Duggan, Johnny the Bull, Conan, Medusa, Mike Awesome, Mona, Norman Smiley, Randy Savage, Rey Mysterio Jr., Scott Steiner, Shane Douglas, Sean Stasiak, Stevie Ray, Sting, Tank Abbott, The Cat, The Wall, Vampiro, and Van Hammer. And this all happens at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is the next to last match that Randy Savage ever had. This is his very last appearance in WCW. This is wrestling history at the Mid-South Coliseum, but why the hell was Randy Savage in it?
I got to ask you this, bro. Who was writing TV at this time?
That would be Vince Russo.
I didn't know. I really didn't know.
Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo are together, but essentially it's Vince Russo writing the shows and Bischoff saying that works for Hulk. And that's
41-man battle royal.
And we bring in Randy Savage as an extra added attraction. And what do we do with him? Let's throw him in there with 40 other people. What?
Oh, I'd love to. No, I wouldn't. Because my brain would hurt again. Anyway, in the Mid-South Coliseum.